Hi, everybody. Thanks, Eugene, and thank you, SAIA, for the invitation to talk to you today. So I wanted to chat to you a little bit about marketing for architects. I think historically there's been a bit of a hesitancy for architects to promote themselves. I think there might have even been something forbidding it in way back when. So I think that it's something a lot of people struggle with, as do most entrepreneurs. For the purposes of this talk, I'm going to be using marketing as a very much an umbrella term, so to cover everything, including public relations, advertising, events, any kind of communications. So basically any sort of promotional work will fall within this umbrella term of marketing. When SAIA asked me to chat to you all, I was thinking about what I would really want to share. And what I'm not going to do is give a how to, run your Instagram accounts or something like that. I thought I would rather talk about some key sort of strategic concepts that can help you understand how to market yourself best to your audience. Think of them really as thought starters to start a bit of self-reflection, introspection, and once you figure out how you want to communicate, then it all becomes a lot easier. I am not going to give you a whole big introduction about myself. I think Eugene's already covered a bit, and you've seen my bio and everything. If you'd like to check out my CV, you can scan the QR code there quickly and it'll hop onto LinkedIn. And but needless to say, my background is very much architecture. I've been working with architects since I was 22. I lived in London, so architecture is what I've been working in. I now work for myself, and my clients include various sorts of creative businesses, but still a lot of architecture and property and design. One of the experiences that did really impact, I think, my understanding of how architects need this sort of help with their marketing was actually when I moved back from London. So I've been working in-house for a while, and I moved back to Cape Town and sent off my CV to a couple of the larger practices, and I got a lot of feedback saying, this is great, it's a nice CV, but we don't know how we would use you. Why would we need a marketing person? And I think that's kind of been something I've discovered since I've been here, is that most smaller firms don't really have that. They don't necessarily have capacity for it, but they also don't understand how it can benefit them to have somebody in-house helping on the marketing and communications. And this is probably why. So I gleaned this information from the SAIA survey. I just want to encourage everyone. I'll do a little plug for Simi. Please fill in these surveys when they come around. They're very useful information, I think, for everybody. And so if you're looking at the sizes of the architecture practices in South Africa, these top three that we're looking at, the micro, small, and medium, which is really practice sizes of 1 to 10 only, that's where a majority, that's 87% of you are within the size. So we're not looking at, there's not a lot of large practices. And in fact, a macro practice in South Africa is considered more than 20 people. So you can imagine it's only probably at the stage where you start to employ close to 20 people that you're in a position to have someone dedicated to marketing or design, graphic design or something like that. So with that in mind, and also I think there was another interesting little stat that I read in terms of average spend amongst practices on their marketing, and it was, I think, around 5% expenditure. So it's really not a lot that people are spending on their marketing as well. And I think I'm hopefully going to give a bit of a motivation to up the spend and maybe get a little bit more involved. So why is marketing important? Well, that's another thing from the SAIA survey. 60% of new architecture projects are the result of a direct approach with no competitive process. That's marketing in action. That is somebody approaching you directly because of your public profile, because of the experience and the projects that you've shown, perhaps personal recommendations. So that really is sort of marketing in action. Ultimately, marketing is about sales. The more projects you have, the more clients you have, the more money you have, and the more you can grow. But it's not always an immediate return on investment. So that's the one problem. A lot of times people want to engage with a marketer or have an event or host something, and they want to know, how am I going to get work directly out of this? And the answer is you're probably not. A lot of these things, you're in it for the long haul. It's about building a bigger public profile that encourages people, but usually it's not on that first engagement that they're going to work with you. It takes a whole lot of activities over the years that helps you build up this public profile. So Yes, and then another thing I wanted to mention, and this is particularly, again, talking to the smaller practices amongst you, which is 87% potentially, is that often what happens when one starts a small business, and I've seen this with lots of other clients in all sorts of industries, is that your first group of work, your projects come from your own personal networks, your friends and family. I even have, just to share an experience, one of my side projects is I run a charity on the side with a friend. And when we first started, we had amazing donations from friends and family, and it was so encouraging that everyone was supporting us. But because I was marketing my butt off, pushing the charity everywhere, what happened was at about a year, I realized that our donors had moved away from friends and family into people that were complete strangers that were finding us through our marketing endeavors. And that's what you really need to do when you're starting to market your own practice, particularly if you're quite small. You can't just rely on friends and family and your broader network. Eventually that dries up. So especially if you're just starting out, start pushing on your activities, marketing from the beginning, so that at least by the time you've exhausted potentially your personal network, you've got a new network of new contacts that are ready to go. So this is a great little diagram that was shared with me years ago by a fellow small business owner. And I've used it a lot with clients just because I feel it really, really pushes home the importance of marketing. So promote to sell on the one hand is all of your marketing endeavors, your promotions and sales activities. And then on the other side is your capacity to deliver. So these two things go hand in hand. You really can't grow your business, you can't earn more income, you can't win more projects unless you're actually spending some time on marketing as well. It can't be overstated how important this is. And I think people are very hesitant to engage in the marketing, but it's an important part of you as a business owner. I think particularly for creatives, creating is fun, creating is beautiful, it's what you love doing. But very few people have the luxury of just continuing to create without having to earn any money to bring in the new work. So it's awkward, it's weird, it feels very uncomfortable for a lot of people, but just like when you're running your own business, you have to learn how to handle your accounting and do your invoicing and speak to the tax man. Just like that might be something you're not used to as a creative. Doing your marketing is another thing. You have to become an expert in how to market yourself, particularly again with the smaller practices. And I think also if you are small, then another important thing is that everybody in the practice needs to be involved in that. It's not something that should just be lumped on one person's desk. I think everybody really can pitch in and do what they can to help promote the studio. So the first step, usually when we tackle a marketing or business strategy, even with a company or any sort of brand, is to figure out who you are and what is your offering. And a lot of that, I think, is this is the moment for introspection. And I love this sort of sweet spot between what you love doing and what you're good at. And I feel like if you can figure that out, then you already are halfway there. You know how to promote yourself because you know what it is that you want to be doing. So what is the vision? What are your visions and goals for your business? And also in particular, what is your vision and goal for your own life? Because as a business owner, your business is your life really. And so you want to figure out, do you want to grow? Do you have this ambition to have 20 plus employees and fall in that macro? And then maybe have the stress of having to pay salaries as well. Or are you quite keen to keep it like lean and nimble and you like working in that way? So if you can figure all of that out, then it really helps you understand who you are in a business and where you want to take yourself. And then communicate it. Now you know what you really want to be doing. I think a lot of people want to become a generalist. I find in architecture in particular, people are very, very scared to say, no, we don't do that. We only do residential design or we only do commercial projects. Everybody wants to be able to do everything. But there's definitely a benefit, particularly, again, if you're smaller. If you're larger, you can probably have different departments that deal with different types of building. But if you're a smaller company, pick what you're specializing in, and then promote that. Then people really understand where you're coming from. They're eager to learn more about it. They can see your enthusiasm and your passion for it in the way that you communicate. So I'm going to say, don't be afraid to be a specialist. Speak about it. I even on my website, all my communications have said that I consulting for creative businesses. Accounting and law firms are not really my forte. I like working with the designers, I like working with architectural, property, built environment. So that I'm just putting that out there, and I encourage everybody to do the same. Another very handy tool when you're trying to figure out who you are is to do your elevator pitch. And this is actually a great thing in terms of personal development for everybody, even if you're an employee and you're not part of a bigger company. What is your elevator pitch? How do you want to put yourself across to people that you meet? And that really helps you sort of understand where you want to go. And once you've figured yourself out, then you can figure out who is your perfect client. So if you know that you want to only, I'm staying at the moment in a sort of a beach house. We've moved out for the winter, and if that's what makes you really get up in the morning, you just want to work on that. Then find out where are the places that you want to be working, and how do you reach those people. You can get quite granular. Is it a particular location in South Africa that you're really passionate about, or type of location? Maybe it's only things in the wine, buildings in the winelands, or desert buildings, or, if you're a commercial architect, then who's your perfect client? You're talking to property developers. So where do you go and find them? And, if you're talking to property developers, then maybe House and Leisure, I don't know if everyone's seen the new launch House and Leisure, it's amazing. But if that's what you're working on, then that's maybe not the right channel for you. So once you can figure out who you are and who's your perfect client, then I think you start to understand where you want to put your money, basically, in terms of which channels that you want to communicate on, which events to turn up to, and which media to participate in. The other thing, this you would kind of call your target audience if you want. And the other thing not to forget is that we don't only communicate with our clients, there's also other audiences. So for example, in the case of an architect, I think other professionals, contractors, as well as potential employees. So having a good public profile actually helps you recruit the best employees by having them come to you. And also students. I think, finding great students and interns is very important as well. And so by making sure that you're out there and you're communicating to all these various audiences helps you draw in the right people. And then on to the topic of clients. So this is another little stat that came from the SAIA survey, which was a perfect example about what I wanted to talk about in this section. So just to read through it, an average of 50% of business is repeat business, sourced from clients that the practice had worked with previously. So that means that customer retention is working for about 50% of new business. It's a sort of, just let me start that again. Customer retention, so working with the same people, is much cheaper than what you would call customer acquisition. So there's in sales and marketing, there's a term customer acquisition cost. One can work out how much money you spend in order to find a new customer. And I think that depending on different sectors, but there's a number going around that customer acquisition is about 5 times more in cost compared to customer retention. So it's much cheaper, more affordable, and potentially easier to sell to people that you already work with. So your first point of call when looking for new work would be past and existing clients. They already know you, they already love you, they know the quality of work that you do, they're familiar with your processes and your team. So all of those potential barriers have already been broken down with an existing client. And so it's not such a hard sell. So then the next sort of place to approach for new work would be what you could call missed opportunities. So where you have worked with somebody, maybe you've done a pitch or a tender in some sense, but you maybe didn't win that particular job. Maybe there was someone better suited for that particular project, but they've already gone through a lot of the process with you. So they already know a lot about your team and how you work. They've seen quality of your presentations. So that person already knows a lot more about you and is a bit of an easier sell. And then the last place to get new work would be total cold leads, people that you've never worked with before, because you have to go through that whole process with them, build trust, explain how you work, and then move on to actually working with them. So with that in mind, how do you keep in touch with your existing and past clients? I think a lot of people finish and wrap up a project and then it's done. It's out the door. There's no more contact. keep in touch with clients, go back to them. First of all, ask them how the experience was. Get feedback is really important. You can potentially even share that feedback with new clients as well. There's nothing better than a happy client and a good testimonial. And then you keep in touch with them, invite them to your events, share your news with them, send them emails, meet up for a coffee regularly. Just keep in touch with those existing people. You don't have to be knocking on their door for work, but you're just staying in contact so that you're front of mind for them, whether they have a new project or whether they might recommend you to somebody else. Experience, like another little experience share. One goal I set myself, it was last year, I think threw a spanner in the works for a lot of connections, was at the time I said have one coffee per week with somebody different, and none of those are trying to get work from anybody. It was really just touching base with people and see how things are going, which brings me on to networking. So I'm like a really, really strong believer in the power of networking. And I know a lot of people are very, very hesitant about it. And it's got this bad rep. It's these probably horrible events you might have to go to, and everyone has name tags and someone's really trying to press their business card into your hand. And, that's not necessarily what it's about. And I love this quote, networking is more about farming than it is about hunting. We've all been on the receiving end of hunting, I think, when somebody's really pushy, really trying to close a sale and won't leave you alone. And that's not a nice experience for anybody. Real networking is about forming real connections with people and adding value, both ways. It's a two-way street. It's somewhere where you can potentially help someone and they can maybe help you back. But none of that is a given. It's really just about finding people that you have a lot in common with, that you enjoy spending time with, and that you can add value to. I think that something like that can lead to a job potentially, but it could not. And that doesn't mean that it hasn't been successful. A lot of the time, just good networking and building connections could get you a referral. Or at the end of the day, maybe people just think you're really awesome, and that helps as well, because next time someone hears your name, they'll go, oh, that person's really awesome. I think they must be nice to work with. That can also help. So it's all about public profile. It really don't approach it with a sort of necessarily a business mind. Then, sorry, I did enjoy this image. I was thinking of Disneyland and then this popped up. So everyone is an ambassador. Disneyland is the ultimate example of a highly curated environment. When you walk into Disneyland, everybody's in uniform, everyone's living the brand. And I think that's super important for companies as well. First of all, like you would design a space to reflect your company ethos, so do your people. So, everyone needs to be living the brand, share the same values. And I think in a small company, this is probably a little bit easier because there's a group of people who are working together very closely, and they're able to, share their values and vision very easily. I think the bigger the firm, that's where it gets a bit harder. And if you need to work a little bit more on staff engagement, making sure that you keep open lines of communication, that your staff are, on board and they understand what you're going for and are there with you. And then I'm going to, I don't know how I'm doing for time, but I didn't know if I would fill my time or be too short. Here we are. So this is my last little push. This is a PR mantra of mine that I really think that architects need to pay attention to. People like people. So first of all, on your own communication, so when you represent yourself, people connect with humans more than they do with brands or buildings. Show on your website, show who you are. I know a lot of smaller practices are maybe quite hesitant to show that there's only one of them. They might be quite nervous to go, oh, but it's just me, or it's just, 3 of us working here in a home office. But, be out there. The client will find out anyway. You're not going to be able to fleece them for long. So show who you are. Show what you're all about. If you have a team, if you've got a bigger team, show the people behind the process. This really helps to explain the value as well behind your process. So, architecture doesn't happen in this vacuum. It's not just this CAD drawing that magically appears. There's a group of people who are creative, who are technical, that pour all their time and effort and very long hours into creating this building. So show them and share them. And I think that really helps build sort of credibility and trust, and people will connect with you a bit better. So please show your people, whoever they might be. And then the last one, which is, I think, very divisive potentially, is show your people in your buildings. So architecture is about spaces for humans, and yet somehow we end up with these very sterile images which don't show humans at all. Maybe that's what you want, but I would encourage you to try and include a few shots, especially if you're working with a professional photographer. Try and include a few photographs of buildings with people in them. They animate the spaces, they show scale, and after all, you're selling a space for a human being. I find that renders always have people in them, and hot air balloons and seagulls, but when you get to a final photograph, there's just this very sterile environment. And I think that particularly, maybe more so if you're working in residential design, but I would even say commercial offices, they're for people, hospitals, they're for people. Whatever you're working on, it's going to be engaging with humans. So look at your photographs and maybe think, how can we try and incorporate some humans into these visuals? So that's it. Those are my what would I say, 10 top tips. I hope it wasn't too fast or too slow. And we've got some time for questions. I've got just looking in the chat box. If anyone has any questions, please throw them in here. But Anami was saying, just a comment, not a question, networking events in architecture is for suppliers to connect with architects and not for architects to find clients. I wouldn't necessarily say so. I think there are both, actually. SAIA, for example, the SAIA conference is something that's very much architects connecting with clients. And those are networking events maybe that are put on by people who have a monetary motivation for holding an event. But there's also lots of events. You could host your own event. You could take clients to an event. So it doesn't necessarily mean just formal networking, like I said, with the name tag and stuff like that. I think there's a lot of networking that can happen, which is much more informal, and is definitely an opportunity to find clients and take them out for dinner. That's networking. Going for coffee, that's all kinds of networking. Are there any other questions, or are we gonna? There's one.
Yes, no, well, Jacqui, I just want to say thank you. I think one of the objectives was with this 20-minute is to squeeze as much as possible into 20 minutes and to want to hear more, not to wonder when are you going to stop talking. And you've put forward some stimulating thoughts, and one that I thoroughly enjoy and appreciate is the comment, farming is, it's all about farming rather than hunting. But that takes time, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's an investment. I mean, a little experience share. When I first moved back from London, I didn't know anybody in architecture at all. I'd been away for a very long time. So everybody, you talk about personal networks of having grown up in Cape Town. Everybody had their buddies that they'd studied with, and the whole industry had moved along, and I had figured out a different path overseas. And when I came back, I didn't know anyone, and yet I wanted to work in this industry. So I networked my butt off. I went to everything. I went to SAIA events, and I went to any lecture I saw. And none of that was asking for a job or applying for anything. It was really just getting to know the industry. And in the end, it did help. I ended up getting, I actually started working with the Cape Institute, became a client, and then I got a job at DHK. And so, but it was very much a long game, and it wasn't, it's you've got to put effort in, but if it's what you love doing, then it doesn't really feel like effort.
Yes, the issue of farming also makes me think of a comment a very good friend of mine made, who grew up on a farm, and his father was very successful, and his motto was never stop planting. And so maybe that is applicable
Absolutely.
as well to your example. Never stop planting.
Absolutely, absolutely. That relationship never ends, and clients can become friends, can become future business partners or clients again. That relationship never really ends. I'm just looking through the questions in the chat here. SAIA was asking. Yeah.
One last, you select one of those, Jacqui. Unfortunately, we can't answer all of them, but just a last comment on any of those questions.
Okay. So SAIA was just asking, do you think building more of the relationship can reduce the professionalism of the service? I don't think so at all. I think that some of my greatest clients have become very good friends, and vice versa. I think maybe way back when everybody wore a suit and tie to work, there was very much a divide between clients and being super professional. But I think that if you can establish a rapport with a client, I don't think that reduces the professionalism. And obviously, it depends on how you go about that. If you're out getting drunk with them, maybe that's a bit different. But under normal circumstances, I think it's a great thing to build a rapport with a client, and I don't think it conflicts with professionalism.